If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Majority partner, is that what you want me to call you? Managing partner. I'm sorry about that. All right. We talked a little about D.C. baseball, and you talk about not putting Baltimore on the jersey in some way that may offend the folks south of the border. I guess there's also the feeling that, is D.C. baseball inevitable in your mind, or is there something you can do personally to block D.C. baseball if the Astros or the Pirates, and if Bill Collins builds a palace 20 miles south of D.C. or to the west of D.C.? Is there something you can do that would stop that?
We have argued, I think, to this point very successfully, that there should not be another Major League Baseball franchise 30 to 40 miles away from Baltimore, for the reasons that I referred to just a moment ago. It isn't that we would deny the people that live in those areas the recreational pursuit of baseball. We think baseball is a great game for everybody. But when we look at the experience of Boston, Philadelphia, and Oakland, San Francisco, now Boston and Philadelphia only have one team now, but at one time Philadelphia had two ball clubs, and Boston...
St. Louis had two ball clubs. We have that ball club.
St. Louis had two ball clubs. The history of baseball demonstrates that you simply can't put two franchises that close together as they would be if one was in Baltimore and one was in Northern Virginia or in the District of Columbia. So we are opposing that. We think that Oriole baseball is good enough and plenty good enough for us as well as the people in the Washington suburbs, and we thank them for their support, and we want to retain that support for the reasons I mentioned just a minute ago.
Your stance 2 years ago during the strike, obviously born out of your law firm, and you're defending union people your whole life, and it's made you the wealthy man you are today.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Do they still harbor hard feelings because you didn't put a replacement team on the field, that you were the only guy that walked in the other direction and walked away from the other owners in this game? Obviously, last year, we made 4 trips to the West Coast, unprecedented. There seems to be a backlash against Peter Angelos among other owners of this game. Is that going to affect D.C. baseball?
Well, I'm happy to say that this year we only have 2 trips to the East Coast, so things must be improving.
As it ought to be.
But let me tell you, I have excellent relations with the other owners. I think back then when I opposed what they called replacement players, many of them didn't understand, although I made it quite clear that I was opposing the use of so-called replacement players because there are no replacement players for Major League Baseball players. Major League Baseball players, that term means the best of all baseball players. So if you don't have the best available, it means you're just going to have to try to work out an agreement with them until you can get the game started again. In addition, had we used replacement players, had we agreed to do that and the games had been held, the Ripken streak would have been destroyed because Cal was not going to cross the picket line. Cal is a guy who's going to stay with the other players, as he should. So I knew that if we went to replacement players and the Orioles had a replacement team playing other teams with replacement players, Cal would not play and his consecutive streak would be broken. Now, that was another reason why I opposed it. But the real strongest reason, as much as I love Cal and I wanted to protect that streak, both for Cal and for the Orioles, and particularly for Baltimore and Maryland, because that record will go down in baseball history, has gone down, and will never be surpassed. But the reason I was opposed to it was because the whole concept of replacement players takes away the right of a working person to strike for better wages and better working conditions. And, you know, in America today, it is permitted, business or big money can take the jobs away from people who are legitimately striking, and Americans have the right to strike. That's the law in our country, in order to get better working conditions and better wages if they think that they're being underpaid and they aren't being treated properly. In this country, through certain court decisions, now employers have the right to replace workers who are on strike, not just temporarily, but permanently, which means that someone on strike can lose their job, their seniority, and all that they've worked for many years just because they exercised legal rights that they have to engage in a job action to improve their working conditions. We are the only country, America is the only country in which that is permitted. And I see that as a stigma on our great country, because if you have a right to strike, you shouldn't lose your job when you exercise that right. So when the idea of replacement players was broached by owners, I said I don't like the sound of that, because that's just like replacement workers who ultimately take the jobs permanently of the people who are on strike. I'm against that.
Do you think the owners had a backlash towards you? Do you think there was a little hokey-pokey going on sending the Orioles to the West Coast for it?
Yeah, I believe initially many of them were angry because I would not go along with that. But listen, in life you have to stand for the principles in which you believe. And in that instance, that's exactly what I was doing. Now, I was threatened with the loss of the franchise. I was threatened with $250,000 a day fine. And I said, you can pose all the threats that you like. This is my position. I'm against replacement players. The Orioles will have none of it. Do I think that they were angry? Yes. Do I think now, a year and a half or two later, I think many of them recognize that I was right when I told them what you're going to do is destroy baseball. You can't tell the public that they should watch teams composed of mediocre players and call that Major League Baseball. That's not Major League Baseball. And I think as a consequence, many of the owners, being fair-minded individuals, recognize that I was speaking on principle. I felt that that's what I had to do, and I did that. And if I had to do it over again, I'd do exactly the same thing.
What about in regards to D.C. baseball? Owners who still may harbor a grudge against Peter Angelos to allow the Astros or Pirates or find whatever source of power they can to get it done, to put the screws to you, to put the screws to your pocketbook and the value of your franchise and the value of your gate to keep the Orioles and keep Baltimore down.
Well, that's always a possibility, but I think that goes with what I was talking about just a moment ago. When there's a principle involved and you feel that you have to uphold that principle, you have to accept the risks that are a part of standing your ground. That takes, how would you say it? That takes determination. That takes the willingness to incur the risk. I incurred that risk. I don't think there's going to be a team in Northern Virginia. I think that as far as the other owners are concerned, I think they recognize that my opposition was there because I was concerned about baseball and the acceptance of baseball, the continuation of the acceptance of baseball as America's pastime.
How do they get a team into Northern Virginia? How does McClatchy up in Pittsburgh or McLean, whoever it might be, move a team into Northern Virginia? How do you prevent that from happening? You're one vote out of 30.
That would have to be approved by the American League as well as the National League. A two-third vote by the American League and a three-quarter vote by the National League. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I think the Pittsburgh team will stay in Pittsburgh. I am not concerned that there's going to be a team in Northern Virginia in the future. Clearly, I will do my best to see to it that that doesn't happen. Again, not because I would deny Northern Virginians or D.C. residents the opportunity to see baseball, simply because if you have a team in Northern Virginia and a team in Baltimore, you're going to have two teams that are mediocre at the gate, both of which are going to be perennial losers. We don't need that here, and they don't need that there.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
Ago when Arthur Modell parked his little stage down on the south end of Camden Yards, which is now his football stadium, will be his football stadium. Competition, I would think you would agree, in this country is what makes this country great. I have competitors. You have competitors. As far as the Ravens coming into this marketplace and you not being the owner of this team, how much was that as far as being hurtful towards you or towards what happened in the Tampa Bay situation? And why is it that I, as a fan, sense some animosity between Angelos' Orioles and Modell's Ravens? Why can't we all just get along and play in our sandbox and be nice to each other?
Beautiful ballparks, and I believe that they're going to be supported in both respects 100%.
You going to be a Ravens season ticket holder, or are you already?
We already have tickets at the Orioles, And I think we also have a commitment for a box. So we're supporting the team, and we would urge everyone to support the football team.
You're scoring points. I like what I hear. That's Baltimore speaking.
Football, listen, Baltimore has always been a great football town, as Art Modell likes to say, and I think he's 100% right. And I would hope that the day comes that we'll have teams of the caliber that the Colt years, and I believe that's possible here in Baltimore because this is a great town. It's a great state. And as I said, we're situated in such a way that we can draw from a number of places, and we can have very successful franchises.
All right, and there's obviously some issues here with the Ravens being here and basically ripping up what used to be your parking lot right down in front of Hammerjacks and putting up a beautiful stadium, as you said. There are going to be some problems parking this year. I don't think there's any question that you take 2,600 spots and you make them 900 spots, that there's going to be a lot of people that need to find an alternative method to get to the ballpark. And if that means light rail, that means public transportation, if that means a beer bus from here at the barn, then that ought to be the way people get to the ballpark, correct?
Well, we have, since last year when the construction of the football stadium was started, we have been meeting with the stadium authority, urging them to replace the 2,600 spaces that the Orioles have lost because of the football stadium construction.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.
As strenuous as we would like them to be. And what we have tried to impress upon them is, you're not creating these parking spaces for the Orioles. You're creating them for Oriole fans. And if you consider the tremendous amount of money that the state of Maryland has invested in these facilities, you've got to have parking for the fans. I'm happy to say that in recent weeks, I think we're beginning to get a proper reaction. And hopefully, by not this year, but for next season, there should be a 3,800 car parking garage located where the Staples property is on Russell Street. So you're right, there's an inconvenience, but I think we'll overcome that, and I believe the interest in the Orioles will overcome the shortage in parking.
If you love Baltimore sports, you'll love WNST.net.